Morning, folks. Welcome to the Daily Politics. Things continue to move at a breakneck speed here at Westminster, with the future direction of both the Tories and Labour in doubt. And there's still the little matter of Britain's exit from the European Union to deal with. David Cameron said farewell to his last ever EU summit, and he warned his former fellow leaders they can't shy away from the issue of migration.
Jeremy Corbyn has lost the confidence of 8 out of 10 Labour MPs and has been hit by as many as 60 resignations from his front bench team. He looks set to face a leadership challenge, but Mr Corbyn says he won't betray his supporters by resigning.
You might not have heard of him, but Stephen Crabb becomes the first Conservative MP to announce he's standing to lead his party and become Prime Minister. He's promising to champion blue-collar conservatism.
With one leader definitely on the way out and the other increasingly isolated in Parliament, Prime Minister's questions could be a dramatic moment or just a very strange one. Either way, you won't want to miss it. Live from midday.
I wouldn't want to miss it. Would you want to miss it?
Oh, we won't be missing it.
I wouldn't want to miss it. Don't miss it. Anyway, all that's coming up in the next 90 minutes. With us for the duration, we're joined by Labour's Emily Thornberry and the Conservatives' David Davis. Now, at the time of writing this script, Emily was the Shadow Foreign Secretary, and David hadn't announced that he wants to be the next Conservative leader. So has anything changed in the next 5 minutes that I should know about? Nope. You're still in the job?
I'm still in the job.
And
what are you going to do?
Not that I'm aware of.
And you haven't announced?
It could all change.
It's 90 minutes. A lot could happen in the next 90 minutes. Let's talk about David Cameron first, who said au revoir to his last ever EU summit in Brussels last night. The remaining 27 countries, well, they'll continue to meet today without the British Prime Minister for the first time in decades, because they're going to try and get a common bargaining position on how to handle the negotiations with Britain's leaving. It will not be easy. They're deeply divided in a number of areas. Mr Cameron never liked these EU summits, but he did look rather emotional at his parting press conference, and he made it clear that he laid much of the blame for his failure to win the referendum on the EU's refusal to do much about migration.
I think people recognise the strength of the economic case for staying, but there was a very great concern about the movement of people and immigration. And I think that's coupled with a concern about the issues of sovereignty and ability to control these things. And I think, you know, we need to think about that. Europe needs to think about that. And I think that's going to be one of the major tasks for the next Prime Minister.
So, David Davis, if it is all about immigration, do you agree with that?
Well, it's not all about immigration.
Well, but it was the single biggest issue.
The second biggest issue, but yes, he's right.
What was the biggest issue?
Well, the biggest issue is control of the country. If you actually look at the polls analysis of the people who voted, that's what came first. But the second biggest issue was immigration, and certainly, I think, in the northern working class seats, which were the sort of surprise of the night,
right.
It's absolutely the issue. You know, in my own part of the world, my local builder has not had a pay increase for 10 years, effectively.
So it follows, therefore, that as we leave the EU, your side of the argument will have to do something quite concrete and substantial about immigration, or all those who voted for your side will be deeply disappointed.
Yeah, no doubt about that. We have to bring it under national control and control it properly down to a viable level, really, one that suits the overall economic and social interests of the country.
Is it possible to give us an idea of what a viable level would be? It's currently net total migration. Last year was running about 330,000.
Yeah, a lot less than that, probably under 100,000 net. Yeah,
under 100,000.
I would think so.
So you would have to slash non-EU migration as well as EU migration.
I think both would have to come down.
Slash.
But the point I'm going to make to you is that we talk about point system. The point about a point system is that you actually decide each year what your labour shortages are, where the skill shortages are, what your housing circumstances are, and then make a decision each year by year.
So, as a Conservative who believes in the free market, you're now advocating manpower planning on a massive scale.
No, it's not manpower planning, but it is.
It is manpower. You're going to have to take a guess at what the economy needs.
It is effective control of immigration. That's exactly what the Australians do. The Australians had a Conservative government for a very long time and instituted just such a system.
But you're slashing it by over a third.
Well, they haven't had a Conservative government for a very long time.
They did have when they put the point system in. And, well, when I was Shadow Home Secretary, it was at 40, 60,000 a year. We weren't suffering as a result of that. We had great growth numbers, 3% per annum growth numbers, which happened to be also 3% per annum GDP per capita numbers. So everybody was gaining from it. It's no longer true. And that went from those numbers to 10 times that and stayed there for a decade.
Okay.
All unplanned, all unplanned.
Labour will now have to devise a policy on immigration, won't it? Now that we are theoretically in a position to control non-EU migration and EU migration when Brexit actually happens, you need a policy on immigration.
Well, we always had a policy on immigration, but I think that we need to listen quite carefully to what the voters were saying to us about that.
What was that policy?
So I think that, what was the policy?
Yeah.
Well, the policy was that the as to non-EU migration, people could come here if they were claiming asylum, if they wanted to have family reunion.
Asylum's not an immigration policy.
I'm just saying that these are the
obligation.
But just going through them, and then there was family reunion, and certain people could come here from around the world if they had the skills necessary. And then in relation to
well, in EU, you didn't need one because that was free movement, essentially.
Well, it was part of the.
So is it possible at the moment to give us an idea of the outline of a Labour immigration policy?
No, not at the moment. I think that it's too early, but I think that I can certainly tell people that, you know, we have been listening to what the public have been saying, and we will be considering.
Labour politicians have been telling me that for years, that you've been listening. I think people want to know what you're going to do.
Yeah, no, I understand that, but I think the plates have moved, and I think that, you know, we need to, as a matter of urgency, address this as an issue.
I was Shadow Home Secretary when this big change happened, right? And it was plain as a pikestaff. It wasn't deliberate. I mean, that was the year. Those were the years in which David Blunkett was saying we're going to get 13,000 people in from Eastern Europe when the A8 came in, and eventually I kept pressing him on it. He eventually ended up saying it was the Home Office view, not his view, because he realised it was nonsense too. It was a mistake, and unfortunately that mistake's run on. It wasn't a policy at the time.
Can I just clarify an issue with both of you, because you've been a Europe minister, you have a legal background. Mr. Juncker yesterday saying if the Tories choose a Remain Prime Minister, they'll have 2 weeks to invoke Article 50. If it's a Leave Prime Minister, they'll have 24 hours. Can we just clarify that it's actually not up to Mr. Juncker?
None of his business.
It's entirely a British call as to when we make it.
It is the call of the country involved. There is an expulsion clause, but it's not Article 50. You know, the expulsion clause, I think, is Article 7, if I remember correctly.
And that's if you become undemocratic.
It's if you become a fascist state or something like that. You know, it's not.
So it's the British. Once the clock runs, of course, there is a rigid 2-year timetable. Yeah. But do you agree with that? That it's not up to Mr. Juncker to decide?
Yeah, but I think more importantly, it speaks of the anger that is felt in Europe. And you just have to remember, you know, what did Michael Gove say during the election? He said that he hoped that we would vote for Brexit and that there would be a contagion across Europe, and that the European countries would liberate themselves from Europe. So you can imagine, if a Brexiteer does become leader of the Conservative Party and they remain leader of the country, there is not going to be a great deal of give and take.
But he can't tell us to. What is Labour's position? When do you think Article 50 should be triggered?
I think that we should not personally, and again, this is very, very early days, but I personally think that we should consider. I don't think that we should have Article 50 implemented until we've got a new Prime Minister, and I think that we should have a general election.
You think there should be a general election?
I think there should.
All right. So you wouldn't trigger Article 50 till after that?
I think that the public need to have an opportunity to consider this, and I think in the next few months, I think that it will play out, and people will realise that they were.
Is Labour in any state to have a general election?
That people will realise that they were lied to during this campaign, and it will give them a chance to see the truth of what it really means.
Emily said, "Oh, they're angry." The people are angry at the Commission. The bureaucracies, not the countries. The behaviour of Merkel and other countries and the Swedes and so on is very, very different. They're starting to be conciliatory, which is what we expect.
And there's an East European head of steam getting up to get rid of Mr. Juncker as well, the Visegrad group.
Yeah,
can I just ask you this, because we need to move on, a lot to cover today. Do you think there should be an election after the Conservatives have chosen a new leader?
Actually, I don't, because this is a direct outcome of one of our manifesto proposals, which was to have the referendum.
All right. So, on the one hand, things look pretty bleak for Labour leader Jeremy Corbyn. He's lost the confidence of the majority of his parliamentary party and been hit by so many resignations. It's not clear that he can even come close to filling all the vacancies in his front bench team. Some of them, like Emily Thornberry, may have to multitask on that and do job shares. And as we came on air, Pat Glass, who was only made Shadow Education Secretary on Monday, today's now Wednesday, she has announced she's resigning after less than 3 days. That's probably a record, even in the current climate. But the barriers for Mr Corbyn's opponents to challenge him are high. And as best we can tell, he retains the support of a large part of the party in the country. So where does it all go from here, Joko?
Well, that is the million-dollar question. These are very difficult times for the Labour leader. Yesterday, only 40 MPs supported him in a vote of no confidence, compared to 172 who voted for the motion. The vote has no constitutional legitimacy. So what happens now? Well, if an MP wants to initiate a leadership challenge, they need to get the backing of 20% of MPs and MEPs. The magic number is currently 51. If this happens, a leadership contest is triggered, with Labour Party members, affiliated trade union supporters and registered supporters all taking part. The big question remains over whether Jeremy Corbyn would automatically get onto the ballot, or whether he'd need to seek 51 nominations himself. If he did make it, any contender would have a difficult job, because over 250,000 people voted for Mr Corbyn in the last Labour leadership election, which amounts to nearly 60% of the vote. Well, our political correspondent Ian Watson can update us on the latest. And yet again, there is another resignation, perhaps two resignations. Where do we stand at this point in terms of a leadership contest?
Well, I think there's going to be one, Joe. The question is who the candidate's going to be. Just to bring you up to date, you mentioned it briefly, but this is what Pat Glass is saying. With a heavy heart, I'm resigning as Shadow Secretary of State for Education. It was my dream job, she said, but the situation is untenable. And because that situation is untenable, I think that is why we're likely to see a leadership contest. It's probably worth asking Emily Thornberry if she's still in place at the moment. The question is who is going to challenge him. As you said, to trigger a leadership challenge, you need the support of 51 MPs. It's very, 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 very likely that Angela Eagle, until recently the Shadow Business Secretary, has got 51 fellow MPs ready to back her. The question is, what does the Deputy Leader, Tom Watson, do? Certainly last night, the view was it was best not to rush in to the immediate challenge to Jeremy Corbyn, to try and let him, as one person said to me, stew in his own juice, go to Prime Minister's questions, just then underline the scale of opposition from behind him on his own benches, make him feel uncomfortable and see if he throws in the towel. If he throws in the towel, Tom Watson takes over as interim leader, as the current deputy, and he can then have an open leadership contest, as it were, in his own time. If Jeremy Corbyn digs in his heels, then it needs a challenge, and the question then is whether Angela Eagle is that challenger, or whether Tom Watson, who's initially certainly very reluctant to do this, then becomes willing to take Jeremy Corbyn on head on, which might mean, of course, giving up his position as deputy leader.
Right.
One other thing just to think about, actually,
Yes.
when you're talking about the numbers, is if there's a vacancy, nominees only need 38 MPs to back them. So if Jeremy Corbyn, for example, slung in the towel, as it were, and then re-stood, he'd actually have to overcome a smaller threshold than the 51 votes you were talking about, Joe.
Right, it's going to be very strange in PMQs, isn't it, on that side of the House. Ian Watson, thank you very much.
Thanks, Joko. Emily Thornberry, isn't Mr Corbyn now a captain without a crew?
Well, no, I don't think so. I think the Labour Party is 1/3 people strong. You know, we are our members of Parliament, our members of the European Parliament, we are our councillors, we are our activists.
But he doesn't
we are
have
our
a crew
members.
in the Commons, does he? He can't even fill his shadow cabinet positions. It's not the party in the country that is the opposition, it's the parliamentary party, and he can't fill the shadow cabinet positions.
I think that our democracy works on lots of different levels, and I think we have to remember that Jeremy was elected less than a year ago on a 60% mandate of the membership, and he got more than 250,000 votes. You know, we are a democracy.
I understand that, but even so, how can he function now if he cannot fill a shadow cabinet or the posts that go with it?
Well, he's made it quite clear that he's not going anywhere, that if anybody wants to challenge them, then they should sort of...
But no, I didn't ask about that. How does he... He's still got 6 vacancies, and then there are another 40 posts that follow. How does he do that?
we will have to see how it works out. But I think that people need to be clear that his view is that that he's going to stay.
No, as I said, we'll maybe come on to that. I mean, who's your shadow Foreign Office team?
I've got Fabian Hamilton, who is doing Europe, and I've got Catherine West, who's another junior minister. And
has everyone else had their teams appointed yet?
I don't know. I'm afraid it's been a bit of a chaotic couple of days. I couldn't be naming everybody's teams today, Andrew.
Does this amount to a coup?
I think that I think that this is something which people have been thinking about for some time. Some people.
Who?
I don't know. But I mean, I think that it is certainly something that people have been thinking about. Well, it's certainly a challenge. And the question is, what's Jeremy going to do about it? And
the question is this a coup? And if it is, who's behind it?
Yes, well, I don't know.
The symptoms of a coup is evidence of prior organisation. It's clearly organised to come about immediately after the referendum.
There is clearly going to be a challenge now from one of your parliamentary colleagues for the leadership. If there is it your view that Mr Corbyn will automatically be on the ballot paper as the incumbent?
Yeah, well, I mean, in the end, I am a lawyer. I obviously have looked at the rules.
Yes, that's why I'm asking you.
Yeah. Surprise, surprise.
I was hoping for some free legal advice. It doesn't happen very often.
The free legal advice is that, of course, he'll be on the ballot. The rules talk about challenges and they talk about vacancies. And Jeremy's an incumbent, and neither of those two things will apply to him. So, yes, of course, he'll be on the ballot.
But there's conflicting legal advice.
Yeah, there is other legal advice.
I've heard that there might be. I mean, I'd be interested to see. I'd be interested. I haven't seen the other legal advice. I've seen the legal advice that was talked about on some of the other news channels, and barristers coming forward and explaining what the legal advice was on that. And I've seen, as I say, the rules myself. I've not seen the other legal advice, and I would be very interested to see how that is put together. Because, as I say, my honest view is.
No, we've got you, Vin. I'm grateful for that. Did you think you would ever see a time when 80% of the Parliamentary Labour Party would have no confidence in its leader, and that the Scottish nationalists would be vying to become the official opposition? I mean, is this not a measure of the depths to which your party has now sunk?
I think we're going through a very tough time. I mean, there's no doubt about it. We're going through a very tough time. And I think that it's a huge shame. As you know, my strong view is that the Labour Party really should be focusing on the country and the crisis that we're having in the country as a result of the Brexit vote.
Why have you not resigned?
Because I think that there needs to be a voice of calm. I think that we need some cool heads at this time. And frankly, I think that there needs to be somebody within the opposition taking the role of pulling together what Labour's position will be on the Brexit vote.
If it is a battle between Jeremy Corbyn and Angela Eagle for the Labour leadership, who will you support?
Well, first of all, I will support Jeremy. And secondly, I don't think it'll just be those two standing. I suspect there'll be more challenges than that.
But you would continue to support Mr Corbyn even in a leadership challenge?
Jeremy has been elected by 60% of the membership, and in my view, he still has that democratic mandate. If other people want to stand, that's really a matter for them.
Why do so many of his parliamentary colleagues think that he's just not up to the job?
I think what's so interesting, is that this is all about personal criticism, it's kind of verging on personal abuse. I think what was so interesting at the...
Well, it's 80% of the PLP. They think that it's not so much, but they all go out of their way to say he's a really nice guy, he's a decent guy. Whether they mean that or not, I don't know, but that's what they say. But they don't think he's up to the job, and they don't think with him as leader you can win in 2020.
I think what was so interesting at the PLP meeting, the Parliamentary Labour Party meeting on Monday, was that all the criticism was about personality. And there wasn't not one criticism of him in relation to policy. And I think that shows...
The EU referendum.
Yeah, no, but in terms of what his position is and where the party is going and what it is. So none of it was criticisms of what he stands for politically. And the important point I want to make is that is a hell of an achievement to move the party in the last year to where it is. So, for example, putting the importance of fighting austerity on the map, and arguing it in the way it is. It now appears in the dictionary.
We don't know what that means, fighting austerity. Of course, that's the position he's taken. There's no policy for that. We don't know what the size of the budget deficit would be. We don't know what the tax and spend policies. It's just rhetoric.
No, I don't think it is rhetoric.
So,
I think it's about investing in our country in order to be able to grow the economy. I think that it is completely counter-opposite to what the Tories stand for. You know, the idea that we might be heading for a recession, and the only, frankly, I think, the only economist, or certainly the only person in an elected position as an economist throughout the world who would think that the way you get out of a recession is to cut back on the money supply even more is George Osborne, and we certainly stand against that.
Actually, he's not saying he'd cut back in the money supply.
Yes, he is. He's saying
no, he's not. The money supply is controlled. No, that's not the money supply. Austerity budget is fiscal position. It's entirely different. The bank controls it. But let me ask you this: if you just finally, now I've got to hand over to Joe. If we do know Labour's position, and you outline the austerity, the current budget deficit is 80 billion. How big a deficit would you be prepared to run?
I think that it is we would need to look at the books when we came into power, and we would need to make sure that we were investing in things that put money into.
Investing means borrowing.
Well, it's also about the extent of need, because who knows how big the recession may be when we do get into power. So, of course, we have to make a judgment at that point, and we have to be responsible. But the responsible thing to do is for a government to spend money at a time of recession.
Is 80 billion too big a deficit or not now? 8 years after the crash, is 80 billion too big a deficit or not?
I think the whole question is getting the economy
that's
going
the question.
again. No.
Well, the economy's going.
Well, at the moment.
Yeah.
At the moment. And the pound is crashing and the
Well, actually, the pound's rising this morning.
Oh, well, I'm glad to hear it.
Why?
Because how low did it get before it starts to rise again? You know, I mean, we have really...
Why are you glad to hear it?
Well, of course I'm glad to hear it.
Why? It could be good for exports.
No, not for the pound to be this low.
No?
Not for the pound to be this low, and not to be losing all this money from shares. You know, it's
they're
really
rising
worrying.
as well.
But again...
The FTSE's now above its 5-year average.
From a very low point, you know, and the worry is where we're going. Where are we going?
All right.
Where are we going?
Well, I'll tell you where we're going. Follow me.
I always do.
No, I'm not going anywhere in particular. Now, so we don't know if this summer we'll see a Labour leadership contest, although it does look likely. But we know for certain the Conservatives will be choosing a replacement for David Cameron. The pundits' favourites are either Boris Johnson or Theresa May. But at least in the opening stages, the party should have a wider field to choose from. This morning, Work and Pensions Secretary Stephen Crabb announced that he wants the job.
I was brought up to understand that nothing gets handed to you on a plate. On the rainy rugby fields of West Wales, I learnt that it's not a question of waiting for the ball to pop out of the back of the scrum. If you want it, you do what's required and you get your hands on it.
So, Stephen Crabb, that was the worst-kept secret, I think, in Westminster for the last 24 hours or so, has announced he's going to run.
Is he?
Formally declared it.
Very well.
I think we knew that anyway. But Boris Johnson is the favourite. Is he the best man for the job?
I think he is. I'm going to be supporting him. I think, with the biggest issue, as Emily made clear, actually, the biggest issue in front of us for the next several years is going to be managing Brexit. Bringing about the improvement in our trade position, the control of our borders, all those things. That needs vision, optimism, energy, drive. Boris has got them. And that's what it's about.
Is he a man of integrity that people will trust?
I think on the issue, yes, it is. I mean, if you look at the popularity in the party, you look at the popularity in the country, yes. And
what about amongst MPs? Because, of course, it has to go before MPs first.
Yes. I'm pretty sure. In fact, I mean, I don't do the numbers. I'm not actually on Boris's team. I just...
Would you like to be?
Well, not particularly. I mean, I'm just supporting him. I mean, and I don't do the numbers. So I don't know what the numbers are. But I would be amazed, frankly, if he's not already passing 100.
Right. I mean, Theresa May, and admittedly this is just anecdotal, I haven't got the numbers either, but Theresa May is looking popular. And in some of certainly the betting sheets and some of the talk around Westminster, pulling ahead of Boris Johnson. Now the role is actually coming up.
Yeah, this is a bit early to make those judgments. I've been through this. I've been the favourite myself, remember.
But the favourite never wins.
Well, that's the old argument, and these rules of thumb are always good until they're not, you know. And I think there's no doubt Theresa will get a lot of parliamentary support. She is the primary Remain candidate, if you like, and I think it will be Theresa versus Boris in the country, and we'll have a really serious argument about what the country should look like in a few years, and that's why I think Boris will be the best for it. I mean, energy, drive, vision, optimism. I mean, who was it that said optimism is a force multiplier?
Right.
Well, if optimism is a force multiplier, Boris is a force multiplier.
Can I ask a question?
You can ask a question.
Because it seems to me that you came out very strongly about the importance of immigration in this and the importance importance of being able to control our borders and being able to cut back on immigration to tens of thousands. And yet the statement that Boris seems to have come out with is that we should be in the free market and that, in fact, the referendum was never about immigration. This seems to be what he said.
Is he sure?
So you're
That's
supporting
not quite
him?
what he said. But this morning he clarified what he said this morning. But look, listen.
How long do his statements last?
With the greatest of respect, this is going to be a 2.5-year process, and in the middle of it, all the things that the Labour Party said and the Remain side said before are going to be proved wrong. For example, the stance of other European countries on immigration. They're all beginning to recognise it themselves now. So I'm really not sure, but I'm pretty confident that we're going to see a significant sea change in the attitude of Europe to migration in the next couple of years. And that actually was presaged by David Cameron. When he went to
Are you sure Boris Johnson is committed to some of the things that he said about immigration before
Pretty much the only question I asked him was that, come on, Boris, what do we really mean about this? And he says, look, I am absolutely committed to proper control of immigration by us. Our country's control of immigration.
So you said no snap election, though. You said no snap election, and sources around Boris Johnson are saying that they wouldn't favour a snap election. Why not?
I didn't ask him that, to be honest. Because this is the direct outcome of a manifesto proposal, namely the referendum. And I don't think, frankly, a year in, to be honest, if I was making
David Cameron won with a majority.
If I was making a tactical judgment, given the state of the Labour Party at the moment, I'd say have a snap election. But I don't think there's a constitutional requirement for it.
All right, we'll leave it there.
What are we going to do if there's not an election?
Listen, we're locally producing more history than we can consume at the moment.
I agree with that. FTSE is up 144 points this morning, equivalent to 2.35% rise. It's just shy of 6,300, though I suspect in the weeks ahead there'll be ups and downs for that and the currency. There have been some glum faces about this week. George Osborne, Roy Hodgson, not sure who he is, Jean-Claude Juncker. We thought we probably wouldn't see any glamour, but that was until we saw the pictures of the first meeting of Jeremy Corbyn's new look and slimmed down shadow cabinet. There it is. That's what they are. They are technically known as having a face like a wet weekend. This was just before the Labour leader turned to his spin doctor, Mr. Seamus Milne, and was overheard saying, "I'm not sure this is a great idea." People often say that when they tune into the Daily Politics. So what could cheer Mr. Corbyn and his team up? Well, what else but a Daily Politics mug and perhaps a plate of biscuits?
Works for me.
Where are the biscuits? It's sure to improve even the most awkward of meetings and chase away those no-confidence blues. But of course, if you want a mug, even if you're leader of the opposition, who wouldn't want a mug? There's only one way to get one, isn't there, Joko?
Do you know, I've forgotten. No, I haven't. Yes, all you have to do is have this on your table, is tell us when this happened.
I'm not quite sure as to my legal position as a Member of Parliament in prison, how much of my work I can carry on.
Ian Richard Kyle Paisley, 7,981.
And when you smile, the world is brighter.
Get rid of it.
And to be in with a chance of winning a Daily Politics mug to cheer up your day, send your answer to our special quiz email address. That's dpquiz@bbc.co.uk. Entries must arrive by 12:30 today, and you can see the full terms and conditions for Guess the Year on our website. That's bbc.co.uk/Daily Politics.
Why have they got to be in by 12:30?
Because I said so.
OK, well, if you said so,
It's in the terms and
happen.
conditions.
It's coming up to midday here. There's Big Ben. It's another rainy morning in London. Prime Minister's Questions is coming up in a few minutes. It's going to be, well, different. different from any ones we've ever covered these past 13 years. And it's going to be a big one too. But Laura Kuenssberg is here already to tell us. Now, since this is a moving story, minute by minute, what's the latest, Laura?
So in the last 15 minutes, I've just spoken to Harriet Harman, of course, the former deputy leader and former acting leader, somebody who stood actually at Prime Minister's questions. And after basically decades of not really speaking out about leadership, because she's always taken a neutral position, she's just told me that Jeremy Corbyn has to go. She urges him to go, and her position is very clear. She accepts and says that he was elected with a large majority of the membership, but he was given a mandate to lead. He has failed, in her view, to lead, and therefore that mandate basically does not apply. She's obviously very upset by the situation, and she warns too that if he stays on, then he risks the party completely collapsing around him. So that's just in the last few minutes. Various other things. There's a letter from 77 Labour councillors that's just been published, people from right around the country saying that it's time for him to go. Huge pressure piling on him, but still his supporters, and we heard Emily just a few moments ago, saying that that mandate he got from the membership last year allows him to stay.
Are you surprised that Harriet Harman has said this, Emily Thornberry?
No, no. No, I've had conversations with Harriet, and
it's been simmering for a while.
Yeah.
There's good. Oh, I can't ask you. We go straight over to a unique PMQs.
Number one, Mr. Speaker.